Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the session we're going to be running with Tracey Salisbury of CV Prime. Just before Tracey comes on to talk to you about the type of work she does for CVs and how she can help you, just a reminder, if you're watching on catch up, welcome, and can you please put a note in for hashtag catch up so we know that you were with us. Secondly, please do come into the comments. Sometimes Facebook is showing us, sometimes they aren't. So by all means, comment in the Facebook group and then we'll get back to you through that at a later stage. So I'm going to introduce Tracey. She's got a raft of experience in HR. She's worked in lots and lots of different types of organisations. And I think that makes her really, really interesting to for writing a CV. A lot of CV writers, that's what they've ever done. They've always written CVs, but I think because Tracey's got a really wide range of experience in different types of organisations, different cultures, different backgrounds, that she really can get under the skin of you and your CV and what it needs to look like. She really loves writing them. She said that she finds working with people so enjoyable, and knowing that she's helping them to get the right job at the right time is a really big thing. So I will pass over to Tracey, and we'll see you later. There you go.
Thanks, Denise. Thanks for the introduction. As Denise said, when I was first asked to speak today, I hope I can give you some information into a bit of an insight around CV writing, what makes a good CV, what should you have in your CV, but also talking about some of the kind of human element of CV writing and bringing a bit of yourself into your documents as well. Just as a bit of background about me, as Denise just said, I've worked in HR for my whole career. Started off in very corporate within Barclays Bank, so within the call centre environments, and quickly moved on to being sort of HR lead and doing lots of HR work there. My next role was in charity, so I worked in the third sector for about 10 years, and that was an absolutely amazing experience. You know, very, very human, the real human elements of HR. Lots of working with volunteers, lots of fundraising, and a really lovely organisation to work in. Following that, I did a short stint in government in an HR role, and then I moved over to consultancy. So I've been working as an HR consultant since then. So kind of working with lots of different organisations. Along the way, I also started to get into CV writing and helping people on their job search, and actually helping with that sort of side of the role. And I found that there's such a gap in the market between the HR elements of perhaps terminating employment, people leaving jobs, and actually then them looking for a new job. So such a market of people that really needed help then to bridge that gap and actually pull together their skills, talking about transferable skills and what they can bring, and how that can then be used as part of the job search. There's different reasons people can need a CV, and very often I talk to people about whether it's choice or situation. You know, for some people, writing a CV and looking for a job is a real conscious choice. They might have been promoted, they might have requalified, you know, they're really excited, they're really passionate about the job search, they can't wait to get stuck in. The other side of the people are the people who are situational searchers. You know, they've had this forced on them. And over the last year, I think that's become more apparent than ever before in my whole career. Lots of people through COVID perhaps have lost jobs. Lots of companies, unfortunately, have struggled and shut down. And these people, even though they need to find work, haven't got that same level of excitement and motivation as the other pool of people. So for me, CV writing is about getting to know that person. You know, what's their motivation? Why are they writing their CV? What are their kind of personal stumbling blocks? What's holding them back? And it sounds a bit cliche, but it really is, you know, one size doesn't fit all. And what will motivate one person and really get them to get stuck in isn't going to work for somebody else. The other kind of big area that I deal with in CV writing is people transferring between sectors. And very often people will say to me, you know, I've been doing this all of my life. I can't possibly do anything else. And for me, it's talking about those transferable skills. You know, everybody has a wealth of transferable skills that can go between roles. So actually thinking about highlights, thinking about achievements, and what the new job is looking for that actually people have done that very often they just don't realise. Making a good impression, obviously, on a CV is really important. And you've probably heard the statistics that you get 10 to 30 seconds to actually impress somebody with your CV. you know, that detail, that kind of level of making somebody want to read on is really, really important, and highlighting those key skills high up on the page. And, you know, the eye naturally falls to the top third of the page. So making sure that what you want to say is said very quickly and very clearly. One of the questions that I'm often asked about is career gaps. As we say, over the last year, I think there's probably a larger number of people that have had a career gap, perhaps because of redundancies. People may have been furloughed and that wasn't sustainable for the companies. So actually being able to kind of pull together what you have done during that career gap. Very often I'll talk to parents that are returning to work and they'll say, well, you know, I haven't done anything in the last 5 years except for be at home with the children. And we talk about the kind of wealth of skills that actually being home with the children could bring. You know, people sit on PTAs, people deal with the family finances, the scheduling. Very often I find that parents returning to work, you know, are very hard on themselves and kind of don't see that as being a highlight or something worth mentioning. And again, that comes to getting to know the person, you know, getting to know what motivates them, what are they looking to sort of gain out of their next career move. CV contents obviously are really important, and there's quite a lot of lots of views, lots of information around what should be in a CV and what makes a CV. These are the areas that I would say are vitally important to make sure that you get right and to make sure that are there very clearly. So clear headings is really, really important on the CV. Break your sections down, you know, don't just have a jumble of words and sections running into each other. Might sound very obvious, but put your name and contact information on. And by contact information, include your LinkedIn profile. Make sure you've got your phone number, your email, and more importantly, perhaps make sure you've got your home address or at least your hometown in the first part of your postcode. Lots of ATS systems and job search systems, which we'll talk about in a minute, will actually search for candidates within a certain distance of postcode or town. So if that's not on your CV, you could well be ruling yourself out of lots of potential roles. Having a really strong personal summary on a CV is probably the most important part. You know, it sets the scene of the CV. It will introduce who you are, generally around about 100 words, you know, 5 lines, but kind of who are you in a nutshell? Why are you applying to this role? What will you bring to the role? What are your real big achievements? And that section is likely to be it that makes somebody want to read on. You know, they want to know a little bit more about you and what you can do. The next section on a CV, the skills section, again, is really, really important. Transferable skills, as we said a moment ago, are the key really to anybody that's changing sector or trying to evidence what they can bring to a role. So having a section on your CV that's actually dedicated to showing what are your skills sounds very obvious, but if it's scanned by a system, the system will pick up those keywords quite easily. And if it's read by a person at a glance, you want them to read your CV and see all of the things that you can bring to the role that they're looking for. So it's really important to tailor that section when you apply for jobs. One mistake job searchers often make is to send out a blanket CV to every single job, to every single company. And that's really unlikely to meet the words and the skills that those companies are actually looking for. Next sections, work history and education, certainly need to be on your CV and should be on your CV. I always say to people, be quite selective what you put in there. You know, you want to show your full history and you want to show your full education, but skills and achievements that you gained perhaps 10 to 15 years ago probably won't be massively relevant to the job now. So think about where you position your skills and how you present them on the CV and how much detail you actually include. You know, you need to approach your CV in the sense that every single word counts. You know, every word on that document potentially could get you your next job. And then it's absolutely fine to have an additional information section or some data and some quantifiable information if that's relevant. You know, you might make big statements in your CV around how you've saved the company significant costs or you've generated efficiencies. And if you can justify that with a figure, you know, with an amount, you know, what was your percentage increase from and to? How many teams did you manage? Was it on a global basis? That kind of detail can be the difference between it being an empty statement and actually holding some weight and really detailing what you've done and how you've done it. Additional information, very often people ask, you know, should I put my hobbies on a CV? The answer to that really is probably not unless they're relevant. You know, if your hobbies are reading and baking and cycling, it's probably not going to be massively relevant to the job. But there will be times that hobbies actually will be really relevant to the company that you might be applying for. You know, if one of your hobbies is fundraising or running marathons for charity and you're actually applying for a role in the charity sector, that might be a really, really relevant thing to include on the CV. So very much I would tailor that depending on what the hobby is, what it brings, and actually is it going to help in your job search. Okay, next section, I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about the different ways that CVs are assessed. Very often people, especially if people have been in a job for a long time or have perhaps worked in more traditional organisations where all of the shortlisting is done by hand, or perhaps worked with recruitment agencies where they may envisage shortlisting being done by hand, will often expect that somebody will physically read their CV and read between the lines. One of the most common questions that I get asked, and I would say I'm asked it probably on a weekly basis, is I applied for a job last week and I got a rejection email within 15 minutes. How did they shortlist me within 15 minutes? And the answer to that is, they didn't. The ATS systems or the AI systems did. What the ATS systems do, and if you're not familiar, it's an applicant tracking system is what it's called, is they will actually carry out the shortlisting or the scoring for a CV or an application against a role. Increasingly are being used in more and more organisations, and they will look for key skills, key achievements that actually match the criteria that the role is looking for. So that comes back to it being absolutely vitally important that you tailor your CV for every single role. Pick up on the terminology that's in the job description, in the advert. If something's listed as being essential, you can more or less guarantee that they'll shortlist you for it. And the other kind of piece of advice there really is not to take anything for granted. Again, very often I'll say to people, have you done so-and-so within your career? And they'll say, well, of course I have. I'm a 40-year-old man. And the response to that is the system doesn't know that. It loses that ability to read between the lines and that ability to second guess. So you need to make sure your documents are really ATS compatible. Keeping your documents quite clean, keep the text and the formatting well laid out. Avoid things like logos and photos, and anything that can confuse the system is also really, really important. CV hunting and CV searching in general, as I say, to me is much more than just writing a CV. I'm actually a trained mental health first aider, and a couple of years ago I did a course that one of the things we looked at was the link between unemployment rates and suicide rates. And I was absolutely astounded to learn that the link between unemployment and suicide, is massive. For me, that was a real eye-opener. And I think for anybody, whether you're looking for a job yourself or whether you perhaps have friends, family, colleagues that are looking for a job, it's really important not to underestimate what a difficult process that can actually be. The sort of reality of getting rejected from applications, people start to question themselves, am I good enough? Are my skills good enough? Why can't I get a job? And at the moment, there's such a focus on mental health and mental well-being, which perhaps has been exacerbated quite a lot over the last year with COVID as well. And I would say from an HR point of view, from a job search point of view, and more importantly, from a mental health first aider point of view, keep that in perspective and look after yourself. Not everybody is naturally resilient, and not everybody finds it easy just to keep going after knockbacks. And so really do, look after yourself and look after your loved ones that might be looking for roles. There's lots of ways that you can enhance your job search, and I won't go into lots of detail about them because they're not massively kind of relevant to the CV writing side, but using platforms like LinkedIn is a really, really good tip for job searchers. Lots of jobs are advertised on LinkedIn, and using your network and actually tapping into your network to find roles is such a good opportunity. And the same at the bottom there, we've talked about working with recruitment agencies. There are agencies out there that are specialists in their field, and actually their job is to help you find roles, and they really, really want to do that. So make the most of any opportunities like that come up. Around cover letters and personal statements, CVs certainly hold their place in the market. Many organisations want CVs. What we find increasingly at the moment, and certainly in some of the bigger, more corporate organisations, is they're actually not accepting CVs as part of the application. And it's done through their online application form and then a very competency-based personal statement or cover letter. So if you're asked to write something of that nature, the biggest advice I can give there will be to demonstrate how you meet the competency personally. They're obviously aware that you've got the knowledge and you've got the skills, but they want to know what have you done and what can you bring to that. So make it very, very competency-based and very personal. And the job search process, really ties into everything that we've said. I think you need to be in the right mindset to be job searching. And like we say, for some people that's very easy. You know, they're really excited, they're really passionate to get stuck in, and they can't wait to start working. And for others it can be a lot more difficult. So I think supporting people to get themselves in that place where they're ready to start looking and they're ready to start their search is the bit of my job that I absolutely love. You know, just helping people to prepare themselves and sort of put their best foot forward, really, to find their opportunity. 5 top tips we've kind of covered as we've talked through, to be honest. But if I could give anybody 5 top tips on a CV and what makes a good CV, keep your information to the top third of the page. The eye will naturally fall to the top third of the page, and you don't want your biggest achievements and your biggest skills and your real highlights to be right at the back page somewhere or lost in the middle of lots and lots of text. So keep it highlighted, keep it there, you know, be proud of what you've done. Tailoring your CV for each application, I've covered quite a lot, but I can't stress how important that really is to kind of do that and to make sure that you don't just blanket apply for everything. Checking spellings and grammar sounds quite obvious, but it's really, really important. Firstly, in terms of systems scanning for words and phrases, you know, if they're spelt wrong, they won't be picked up. But also in terms of your own presentation and your own kind of standards of work and accuracy. Having headings for each section, again, I mentioned that earlier, but the ATS systems will look for headings on sections, and it's really important for your CV to be very readable and very easy on the eye and label what each section relates to. And then being specific about what you include. Sometimes people would say be ruthless, and I think pinning it down to, like we say, every single word on your CV is a word closer to getting the job that you want, and you've got very limited space to convince a company or to convince an agency or a hiring manager to actually want to work with you. So use it wisely. You know, it doesn't matter if your CV is 2 or 3 pages. Don't cut out important information. But if the information isn't relevant and if you can't read it back and answer the question of, so what? What did it achieve? Why is it in there? Then it probably does need to go. And then just to finish up, I just thought I'd talk a little bit around the benefit really that working with a CV writer or a coach or an agency can kind of bring to a job search. As we say, I think very often it's underestimated how tough and how challenging job search applications can actually be. You know, I've worked with a number of people, especially recently, that perhaps have worked for their company for 10, 15, 20 years and have never actually written a CV and they've never been to an interview. And this is a massive, daunting process. So I think, you know, for yourself and for everybody else, you know, just don't underestimate how resilient you need to be and how applied and committed you need to be. And if you need some support throughout the way, seek it. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying I need a bit of help and asking for that help. Tailored support kind of ties into that. As I say, to me, it's really important to tailor the provision and the service and the coaching to what the individual needs. Of all the people I work with, it's very rare to do the same kind of relationship building twice in a day, in a week. And working with somebody that you really genuinely feel understands you and can support you and has that industry experience and knowledge, perhaps as a recruiter as well as, you know, as an interviewer, you know, and can really kind of apply that and support you through the journey is so important. And I've put testimonials on there. You know, to me, the part of my job that I absolutely love is that human element. You know, it's knowing that I've made a difference. It's working with these people that genuinely need the help and knowing that actually I can help them with that. And the testimonials, you know, when you receive a testimonial from a client that expresses that, that really is, you know, the very, very worthwhile, very lovely part of it. That kind of sums up the main things really that I wanted to cover today. So Denise, is there anything that you would like to ask or any other questions at all that you wanted to pick up on?
Hi, thanks for that, Tracey. Really good. And it's interesting because, you know, a lot of people through the last couple of days have talked about CVs and content and what they look for and all that sort of thing. But you've sort of rounded it all up into, you know, one package. And, you know, last night we were listening to so Joe from Lad Bible. They don't use CVs.
Yeah, I did listen.
They use LinkedIn profiles. So you working on things like LinkedIn profiles and that as well with people, are you not?
Absolutely, yeah. I tend to find the most common things people need initially is a CV and a cover letter and a LinkedIn profile. As clients start applying for jobs, like I say, and certainly in roles like the civil service and the NHS, and some of the more sort of public sector roles, they're actually coming away from CVs now, and increasingly I'm getting requests for personal statements. So a few years ago, personal statements really would have only been used for kind of university and UCAS applications, and very rarely actually for jobs. But there's certainly a trend towards looking at competencies very, very early on now, which kind of ties in with the Lad Bible approach of it being more about the person and the fit rather than what's written on a piece of paper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've done some work with some of the diversity groups as well over the last few years, and had them speak at conferences and events that I've organised, and they are on the no CV trail at all. It is literally come and meet the individual and then find out afterwards if, what their knowledge is. They still need something somewhere down the line, but it's interesting because 5 years ago everybody just had a piece of paper, and hopefully it was only 3 pages, and sometimes it was 10. And
there's a lot of speculation about the future as well. My son actually come home from a careers event at the school about 6 months ago, and he's only 12, and he actually told me that by the time he writes a CV, they'll be on TikTok. He said, people won't have CVs, they'll be on TikTok. And I thought, that's quite a scary thought, but it'd be interesting to see if it comes true.
It's a marketing challenge then, Tracey, isn't it? You've got to get out there on TikTok and do
it. I'm outsourcing it. But it's interesting how the youngsters, the young people of today that are actually emerging now, they look at you like you're crazy when you talk about CVs, and they're like, but everything's online. Why would you have a piece of paper? And it's quite an interesting thought as to how the future will go with people applied, especially in creative roles.
Yes.
I think it's quite an opportunity for things to change. So
that's exactly what Joe and Dinah were saying last night, wasn't it? That they'd much rather have a reel or something like that to having a written black and white document. Yeah. And the other thing that Russell and I were talking about was the fact that, the fastest finger first on the CV, and that, trying to help people understand that applying for 100 jobs, you haven't actually applied for 100 jobs, you haven't qualified.
And I think the other big tip for people is keeping your CV up to date as well. I deal with so many people that say, well, I've got a CV, but actually it's 10 years old. And you think if you just update it as you go, even if you don't physically update your CV, update your achievements, update your jobs. If you do suddenly see something you want to apply for, you're kind of a step ahead to do that, rather than a big panic to suddenly prepare your documents.
That's absolutely right. In my role as a personal development coach, I always get my clients to have their own little black book, and it can get as dog-eared as you like over the years. But in the front of the book, you sort of write down what you're doing and what you're working on. But in the back of the book, you write down what you've achieved and what's grown. And somebody will say to you, well, what was your salary for that job? Because that happens, doesn't it, sometimes in sort of reference checking, things like that. You can't remember. Whereas if you've got your black book or your online thing, just keep it up to date. At the end of every week, at the end of every month, sit down and think, I've had a really good month. I achieved X, Y, Z, because you won't remember that when it comes to do your CV. So I'm a great fan of keeping up to date as you go along.
Definitely.
We've all seen those rushed CVs that obviously don't cover what somebody's must have achieved in the jobs they've held.
And it's hard to think of it when you're on the spot. When somebody then says, what did you achieve? You can't think what you achieved. It's it is easy to refer back to.
Yeah, those competency answers, they really need it. Well, it's been so good. Thank you very much, Tracey, for doing that. And I know that we'll be seeing more of you on the page as time goes on. So, because you and I are going to be doing some stuff together, so that's really good. So, have a nice evening, and thanks for the presentation.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so short break. I'll have a cup of tea. And then I'm going to be back on at 7:30. And I'm just going to talk tonight about sort of rounding up the presentations. And I'm going to talk to you about the part of the work I do as a career coach in the first stage of starting to think about your job search. We haven't got time to go through the whole process, but I just want to sort of give you some top tips and some thoughts, something to get the grey cells moving on. What happens at the beginning when you decide I am going to make a change, or you suddenly find you've had a change thrust upon you, whatever it's going to be. So that's what I'm going to be talking about at 7:30. So I will see you then.